right, so this one is a more specific question for you, Mark. Drag racing is really big here in Antigua, and
Yeah.
for somebody like me who has like a weekend warrior
Hmm.
Honda, it's a K20 motor. I've been kind of up and down about what type of fuels to use. So from one side, you're hearing, okay, use Q16 because that's something a lot of folks have used around here. But as you've been talking about ethanol fuels and all of this, we're thinking more about C85. If you were to do a matchup between, let's say, Q16 versus C85 for a turbocharged setup, what
Hmm.
would you think would be some of the advantages or disadvantages of either of those fuels being matched up?
Sure. So I have to ask you a little bit more about your specific engine and about the fuels that you've been running so that I don't need all the history.
All right. So, what specifics do you need in terms of like if it's
So do you
turbocharged?
have?
Pardon me. Do you have an oxygen sensor?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you have a catalytic converter on this? Okay. Um, Naturally aspirated,
No, turbocharged.
turbocharged. Okay. And the fuels that you have tried in the past.
So basically, I drive it around on pump, but when I'm ready to race, I want to have something in there that I know will make power, but make power safely.
Okay. So the the reason I asked the last question is without asking you any or all of the modifications, which might be anything from pistons to cylinder head work to bigger turbochargers. If you're able to run pump gas, it tells me approximately what your octane requirements are. And so knowing that gives me uh, a uh,
Good idea in terms of
better idea of
space.
which way to direct you. First, because you have an oxygen sensor, we don't want to introduce leaded fuel into the motor unless and until the unleaded fuels can no longer satisfy the detonation requirements of your motor. So because you can run 93, that makes it easier. But let me just expand on that last point. Because the leaded fuel will impact the O2 sensor, and if you have it, the CAT, and also because the late model spark plugs tend to be very fine wire, they on the electrode, they can become fouled or shorten the life expectancy using the leaded fuels. Now, if the unleaded fuels, like the 109 that we talked about before, cannot control detonation, which is simply stated abnormal ignition, then ruining an O2 sensor is a lot cheaper than putting a hole in a piston.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I mean,
All right.
maybe 80
So
bucks.
So before I go off on another tangent about octane and abnormal ignition, your car would be a good candidate for any of the unleaded fuels, starting with the C9 or the Performance Unleaded. Those would be my two top choices. I wouldn't jump right to the Motorsport 103 or Motorsport 109 for a couple of reasons. First, the 100 octane is going to be more than enough so that the sensors on your car will never detect detonation. And because you haven't made any modifications, the octane may be irrelevant. You've already said that you've got enough with 93, but the sensors may say, well, I've got more, but I hear detonation with that 93. You may never hear it because the sensors, which pick up a frequency known as detonation, say, all right, that's the max boost I can give you. That's the max timing I can give you. And that's the best air fuel mixture that I can give you. But if you put the 100 in, you're going to notice a difference for a couple of reasons. First, the sensor is no longer going to hear any of that detonation or any of those problems. So the O2 sensor and the computer has a duty cycle, and it might be this wide. And 93 may put it here, but a lot of the guys will disconnect the battery so the computer doesn't have any bad memory and it goes right to the top or halfway and says, I don't hear anything, I can go a little further. If it has to relearn it, it's a little bit of a slow process, but I'm talking a couple of a couple of times when you're in the throttle. We're not talking a long learning curve, but a lot of my customers used to come in and disconnect their battery because they wanted to erase any bad memory. So the thing goes right to the top and says, I didn't hear anything. I can run there all the time until I have a bad experience.
Understood. All right, nice. I mean, no, much.
Stop me anytime if I'm giving you too much.
Oh, that's the type of information that we're looking for.